The medieval period in history runs from 500 to 1400 AD. This was a different time, and therefore, what the medieval societies did for education also is slightly different. Let's look at them under the 6 elements. The goals of education in the medieval times was, yes, of course, develop religious commitment, continues from the Greeks, the Romans, the Arabs, and now into the medieval world. Knowledge and ritual, establish social order, prepare for appropriate roles. Social order, so we do believe that they had a social system, they had a social class system, and the roles were different. The upper class had a different role, the middle class had a different role, the lower class had a different role. And if you wanted to understand the roles you had to play, you had to receive that particular education in that particular economic strata that you fell in. Students were male children of upper class, girls and women entering religious communities ages 7 to 20. Now, there are two things that we see here. Again, from all males under the Greeks, the Romans, and the Arabs, we go back to only males of the upper class. But we also see girls and women receiving an education for the first time. And this was religious education. When they say religious community, if girls wanted to go to convents and become nuns, they were allowed to receive religious education. That is the only education that was open to girls at that time. There was no secular education for girls yet. But it's a change because girls at least begin to get a religious education for the first time. Instructional methods were memorization and recitation in lower schools, primary schools, text analysis, discussion in higher schools and universities. So education goes beyond just the initial primary or elementary or secondary, because now we see universities showing up. Higher education comes about. And we also see here for the first time text analysis. Texts were given, you chose a particular text to study, but you were not dependent on the teacher giving you the analysis of the text. The students were permitted to analyze the text on their own, maybe then get together because there's discussion. You have to have a discussion when you have 4, 5, 6, 10, 20 people in a room and you analyze the text. You don't have to agree. My analysis is not what everybody else has to agree with. You could still discuss based on individual ideas, notions, opinions, recommendations, suggestions, and the like. Curriculum in Athens was reading, writing, arithmetic, philosophy, theology, military, and chivalry. Now we see that Athens is also getting some military and chivalry exposure. That's because as the world expanded, the need to expand where you will have your military also changed. So strategic analysis and strategic planning came about. We saw under the ancient Greeks that Sparta had the military education only. Now Athens begins to get it too. The agents were the parish, the chantry, the cathedral schools, universities, and knighthood. Again, these are religious schools, schools connected with churches at the time, and the church had a great influence, and therefore education had to depend or at least be tied with the church, and therefore was limited in how it could really expand. Influence on education was structure and organization of the university came about, and institutionalization of knowledge. Knowledge was now institutionalized. You had schools, you had universities. Universities had to have a certain structure, and then in universities you had to have disciplines. So there was math and language and religion and science and medicine and law and philosophy and all that. And so we see a massive change in the medieval times for education leading to the future.